Thank you very much, James. I'm Tom Dyson, and I'm going to give you a slightly gloomy talk about a project that I was involved with about 6 years ago, but one which I hope has some valuable lessons. So the backstory. Is that I run a web agency called Torchbox. We're based in Oxfordshire and Bristol. My business partner Ollie, we employ about 35 people, and we work for our clients are generally people who make the world a better place. Charities like Oxfam, Greenpeace, and WWE. We had our epiphany about climate change in 2006, and we had a company trip to watch the Al Gore film, and that was followed soon after with going to a talk by George Monbiot in Oxford, which is a very, very inspiring talk, and was really part of a tour he was doing to accompany his new book, Heat. And in that book, and in the talk, he explained the idea of personal carbon rationing, an idea that was expanded in Mayor Hillman's book, How We Can Save the Planet. Any of you familiar with this book? A couple. I was very excited about this book. I read it. It's quite a heavy going, although short piece of work about firstly about the problems that the world's facing, and then secondly about how personal carbon rationing scheme might be implemented. And in my enthusiasm, I bought 10 copies of this and given them as Christmas presents to all my amused relatives and friends. So what is carbon rationing? Well, I think Matt will probably talk with much more authority about carbon rationing, and particularly the current state of it. But briefly, the idea is that we work out how much carbon the UK can commit in say 15 years' time if we are to avert disaster. And then we agree an achievable trajectory from this point where we are now to that point where we think we can land in the future. And from that amount, we assign a chunk to government, and then we give the rest, we divide the rest among the population. Each year, our allowance decreases until we hit that target. And if you don't use your annual target, say 10 tons of carbon, then you can sell it somebody else. So that's the idea in a nutshell. I'm sure it's moved on a lot in these things. And to me, it seemed like a very elegant and persuasive and progressive way of addressing this terrible problem. And as interest in global warming and climate change surged in those heady days of 2006, we got used to hearing the ways that people sought to diminish their personal responsibility. I already recycle was the classic one. And then the more understandable, can't the government sort it out? So what about China? Why should I change my habits when China's opening a new coal-fired station every 20 seconds? I can't afford a new Prius or to get a more fuel-efficient car or to change my insulation in my house. And a sort of overriding one is just too complicated. I can't get my head around what the problem is and what I would need to do to solve it. And that's where we thought perhaps we could help as a software company. And so the way that we thought we might use our skills to address this problem that had been highlighted by our Hall's film and by talking about this talking, and the solution to which we felt had been presented in this book by Mayor Hillman. Our response was this thing called the carbon count, carboncount.com. And the goals of the carbon count were twofold. Firstly, to help show people that it doesn't have to be too complicated to measure and reduce the carbon that they create and emit. And secondly, to demonstrate the feasibility of the personal carbon rationing scheme, both to individuals but more importantly to government. And with those two goals in mind, we assumed three types of behaviour that might underpin the system we were building. First is this kind of business cliche idea that you can't improve anything until you measure it. And I think still holds true in this case. The second is that, it's hard to do this stuff in a vacuum. So you might be more engaged in behavioural change activity if you're comparing with other people, competing with other people. And the third was that we felt that if we could remove the frictions to trading, that's all that needed to happen. As long as we remove those barriers, then this trading is really happen. So we invested in this product. We've teamed together from people who are working on client projects, all of whom are scary young over there now. Some of them may know to you there. Black and white picture at the top. Jamie Andrews, who might be here tonight, who runs Logo 2. I think he's talked here. Natalie and Simon at the top are sort of quite big names in the UK startup scene now. And so a mixture of designers and developers and project managers and community managers. And we started working on this and we did some maths and we did some design, and this is a sort of early with blue, which I didn't like very much, and then we went to slightly, this one was a little bit too corporate, and this one's a little bit like too much like a personal banking. And the final version looked pretty much like this. And it's quite hard to see the detail from here, but there's a few points I'll just try and draw your attention to. This is the home screen, and we try to give this dashboard feel, so you immediately feel what your progress is, and you see what the obvious actions are for you. So you can add reading, the most common readings, the button at the top, flights and electricity, gas, and you can see at a glance how your performance has been over the last year, and that's what the graph shows. And that's divided up into the different types, and you might just be able to read at the top left-hand side of the graph, currently set not including flights. And the reason for that is if you do fly and you include flights, it diminishes their error so much that it's hard to see their equals to the error. And you can see underneath that as well as some of your friends, so the other people you know who are doing this is the idea of comparing and competing against other people. So fundamentally, what the carbon count did, and I'm going to dwell on the slide a little bit because I think it's the bit that I'm most proud of, so it recorded these key emissions, and the ones that we felt were simplest for people to put in, and at the same time contributing the key contributors to their carbon performance. So the first two is cars and motorbikes. And in every case, we were trying to make it as easy as possible to do this, but also but really optimising for accuracy. So with cars and motorbikes, we made it possible for users to just put in the registration number of their car, and we found a web API that and then we could do a lookup from that and return the consumption figures for that vehicle. It cost us about 20p a go, but we got a good deal from this company to start with. And then after that, all you have to do is put in your mileage. You don't have to measure the mileage between journeys, because you just keep putting in the current mileage of that vehicle to calculate the difference between the previous time and use the consumption factor that we would need. And then you have two cars, it works in the same way, or you can change cars if you want the same ones. Air travel, this was a problem that surprisingly we couldn't find a good solution to. So there are a few calculators who measured just flights, or short, medium, long-haul flights, but we wanted to do better than that. And as soon as you start delving into the topic, you realise what the complexities are. So as you may know, short-haul flights are bad because a high portion of the energy is used in starting the journey and ending the journey. Long-haul flights are bad because although a shorter portion of the journey is in those kind of intense periods, they tend to fly at higher altitudes, so it gets a multiplier effect. Middle distance ones are worst of all because they combine both evils. There's kind of complex factors that you have to try and work, so you have to work the distance, try and gauge the altitude, think about what the size of the plane might be, calculate the passengers on it, and so on. So we try to do all this stuff exactly the same. Once you start getting into it, you realise, why people complain about complexity, why people aren't doing this, because they're hard problems to solve. Electricity was another one that we tried to make as simple as possible. Again, all you're required to do is put in your supplier and meter reading. And we've got a comprehensive list of UK suppliers, and some of them we gave a factor. So tried to work out factors for the green electricity costs. And again, this is complicated because, as you know, if you use good energy electricity, the electricity that comes out of your plug doesn't come directly from the wind farm. It's a sort of complicated system of credits. And it's quite hard to calculate. But we try to take that into account by giving more generous factors to the people who are using electricity. Gas is more straightforward, although the meters are notoriously difficult to read and provide how I'm doing that. And oil is kind of straightforward, and so a lot of lots of in London, but in rural areas, oil is a very standard way of heating a house. It's an important one for us to do. Things that didn't record were trains. So it would be nice to do trains. I think trains would be easier to do now because there's better data available. But nevertheless, it's not as easy as putting in a journey from Oxford to London because there's a huge difference in the types of trains. Some are electricity, some are diesel. Also, of course, the number of passengers on each train makes a huge difference. Many journeys use two different types of trains, so that was complicated. Buses, not so much, but similarly, and I think also here we decided not to incorporate buses because we wanted to reward people who are using shared transport. And in retrospect, I think that's a mistake because it's kind of highlighting a tension between behavioural change and accuracy. We also didn't record embedded energy, and this is really notoriously complicated. And I remember reading at the time an academic study where a group of academics spent a year getting an accurate count of the carbon value of a single strawberry. And you can understand that, the fertilizer that goes into it, the transport, the refrigeration, so that was a no-go for us. We weren't going to be able to manage that for everything. And also, slightly painfully, we didn't record energy credit. So if you have solar panels on your house, then you may be generating energy, and sort of you may come out in credit. And there wasn't a simple, and I still think there isn't a simple way of handling that. But it's a shame not to be able to address that. I'm going to go into some of the challenges of this because I think this is one of the more important things that we learnt is through this complexity. The first is around child allowances. So if you have more people in your house, then the natural thing is to divide the impact of your house by the number of people who live in it. Clearly, you can't hold a 3-year-old accountable for the carbon profligacy of their parents, but at the same time, you don't want to. In a world where you're imagining personal carbon rationing, you don't want to kind of carry on letting people use more and more just by having more children. So we debated that a bit. I think in the end we just came up with a value of half a human for a child. We also had this challenge of meters at zero, and this is a really painful point for users, and continues to be one for people who are still using the carbon account. And this is if you have the kind of old-fashioned style of meter where you've got the dials that click up from 9,999, and then it flips over to zero, then our system freaks out. So kind of the Y2K problem for carbon calculators. And so at the moment you just have to stop your account and start a new one, which is really suboptimal. There's also this challenge of buy before use. So most fuels you pay for after you've used them, like electricity and gas. But oil is different. So if you live in a country and you don't have gas to your home, you might get a big delivery of oil just before the winter, and then you'll try and gauge as much to live for the winter. But it's difficult to give you a carbon score for when you're on the one hand measuring energy that you used, on the other hand measuring energy that you're about to use in the future. House share and vehicle share, I've touched on that. You can imagine how those are difficult. And then there are more challenges around accuracy. So, as I said, the way we handled car and vehicle emissions is by working out the efficiency of your car and multiplying it by your distance. But that's not terribly accurate because, as you know, you can drive a car in an efficient way and a non-efficient way. So the really accurate way of doing that would be to measure just the amount of fuel you use. And that needn't be too hard, and especially if you drive a car or a motorbike and you go
when you fill up, if you ask for a VAT receipt, it shows you the amount of fuel you get, which is another way of recording. And in fact, we did support that as a sort of secondary mechanism, but not many people used it. There's another one is this factor of the altitude multiplier that I mentioned before, that when the higher a plane goes, the more impact its emissions have. But this is quite a hazy area. It's known that there's a multiplier effect, but there's certainly not consensus on how much it is. There's this question that goes across all shared transport, whether it's planes or trains or buses or boats, about the non-passenger share. So I've got friends in the Isles of Scilly, and I go there every year, and I take the boat, which is a very uncomfortable journey, and I tried to work out, because I was decided not to fly and to take this boat, what the emissions were. And so I worked quite hard to try and find out what the impact for me making this journey was. And so I found out how much fuel they used and how efficient the boat was and so on. But what's difficult to work out is, as well as taking passengers across to the islands, they also have to take all their food and everything out in the post and everything else that the islands depend on. And so you have to, do you subtract that because that's going anyway, or it's kind of quite complicated questions. As someone who, if this is ever done at a legislative level, these questions need to be solved. I mentioned the issues about green electricity and the buy before use stuff. This is a problem that we came across, that we realised that when we launched the thing, that if we're encouraging you to come and use the system, and then you say put in a meter reading, and you put in a meter reading, and then we can't say anything because all you've done is put in a meter reading. So there's nothing to engage you and feel like this system is giving you anything back, because it's only until the next meter reading in a month's time that we're able to calculate how much gas or electricity you've used. So we realised pretty quickly that meant it wasn't a very compelling experience for people. So we had to start asking some basic questions about the size of your house, the age, how many people lived in it, and so on, so we could do some predictions. And that meant we could give you a kind of score up front, and then we just continuously refine that score as we get more and more data. This turned out to be one of the most complex aspects of the system, but I think it was worthwhile, because, as I said, otherwise it's very difficult to persuade people to use it at all. But again, I think it's a problem that people will face. Anyone who builds something else will face. Okay, I'm being encouraged to wrap up. Of the three goals we set for ourselves, I think we did a reasonable job of the first two. We didn't get as far as trading. And I think that's because we faltered. Having built the system, we faltered the final steps. I'm just going to end on I think the things where we went wrong. So our next steps. So having built these things, our plans were this kind of classic mistake that startups make: build it and they will come. And so we built it and they didn't really come. Some of them come. Our friends came. We promoted them to CRAGs. You know about CRAGs? This was quite popular in the day. Carbon rationing action groups. I spent several meetings trying to hassle the Department of Energy and Climate Change, and we sought partners, but there were frictions. So David Miliband, who was quite a proponent of carbon rationing, got promoted to Foreign Secretary, and that was the end of that. We found that most of the people we were talking to were already convinced by the things we were trying to persuade them of. Academics that we were also talking to were weirdly suspicious. I had a meeting with someone about how to do energy readings. And then, and I used it in the carbon account, and then I had furious emails saying I'd stolen her thesis idea, and it's like, this is an emergency. I don't care about your thesis. I'll skip over the last two and move straight on to mistakes. So I think, in retrospect, I think our focus on accuracy was probably a mistake, because although it was, I think it was kind of rewarding to try to solve these problems, I think we should have focused on ease of use, because then we may just have got more momentum. We may have got more users on the system, and then we could have kind of carried on improving it that way. We made the classic mistake that we always tell our clients not to, of trying to build our own network rather than reaching out to the people who are already on Facebook and Twitter and their own networks. We didn't treat the project like a client. So generally we make stuff for other people, and in this case we had this idea and we wanted to build it, but we didn't have the same deadlines and budgets and project teams and so on that we normally do. And that meant that when there was a client emergency, we always, it always came second. Skipping on, I think maybe the fundamental thing here was a lack of empathy about the users who we wanted. So again, too much focus on accuracy, too much kind of thinking about thinking about the same mistake I made when I sent out that book to my parents. Kind of just starting too hard. And so finally, if I had if some donor gave me £200,000 to do it again now, what would I do differently? I think the first thing is, so we did open source it in the end, but I would open source it from the start. I would get a community manager to try and connect all the people who work in this space already. I'd maybe spend a fifth of my budget on that, to try to get all the people who are already working in the space to get excited about this open source project and do it together. I think I'd focus on measuring over behavioural change. I think there was a tension there, like I said before. I'd use Strava. Did any of you on Strava? So this is a cycling and running tool. It's incredibly addictive, and really it's the website I use that has changed my behaviour most, and it does a very, very good job of making you want to cycle faster and compete with your friends, and I'd use a lot of the tricks that they're doing well. Like I said, we'd use existing networks, and finally I think I'd focus on mobile, because that's the easy way of getting this data in. I'm sorry I've gone over time. If you have any questions, I'd be very pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much.